start of the pandemic, around this time 2 years ago, I was standing in a supermarket, a very barren supermarket. There was next to nothing on the shelves, but the aisles were crammed with customers trying to grab as many items as they could. My parents had sent me out to forage for toilet paper, which was arguably the most coveted item in the shop. Believe me when I say that I gripped that packet like it was a lifeline. Next to me, the people were scrambling for items that had just been put out. Arguments broke out with pushing and shoving, and within minutes, the shelves were empty again, and many people walked away empty-handed. This incident left me thinking a lot about how people are interacting on many, many issues, often where people are more concerned with their own narrow benefits rather than wider social consequences. Obviously, the issue in this case was the social cost of people stockpiling, but this point applies at many, many levels. For example, staying with COVID, there are many personal choices that we have to make, such as whether to get vaccinated or to quarantine, but there are also many political and national choices to be made, such as whether to hoard vaccines to boost our own populations rather than supporting vaccination programs in other countries, which ultimately might slow the development of viral mutations to our own benefit. And of course, these themes of personal, tribal, and national self-prioritization at the expense of others has been in the public eye a lot recently. We can think of nationalist movements like Make America Great Again or Brexit. We can think of huge social and environmental issues like failures of international organizations to deal with global poverty and hunger, failures of public health, and of course, huge failures to properly deal with environmental destruction. One example that's of particular interest to me is water scarcity, where countries are now prioritizing their own populations in order to hydrate them at the expense of other populations. About 2/3 of the world's fresh water comes from lakes and rivers across national borders, but this is interrupted when countries construct dams to keep this water for themselves, restricting the flow of water downstream, essentially cutting off the necessary supply to other countries. And as water scarcity worsens, tensions between nations will increase. Take Egypt, which has already threatened Ethiopia with war following the completion of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile. These failures to cooperate run at all levels. For example, lack of international ambition to tackle climate change reflects uncommitted national policies, down to persistently poor efforts to reduce emissions by companies and households. And they're all examples of what one could think of as me first culture, where the priority is on actions that promote selfish objectives rather than wider social benefits, even when this might not actually be in our own interests. Well, this sounds pretty crazy, doesn't it? Why would someone make choices that aren't actually in their own benefit? Well, in fact, this line of thinking is pretty old school. It's a version of the famous prisoner's dilemma branch of game theory, which shows that when people make choices strategically, such as by considering other people's options too, it can be perfectly rational to make these kinds of selfish and harmful choices in some circumstances. For instance, people panic buying toilet paper, petrol, and pasta aren't doing so because of their own needs, but in a strategic response to what they think other people are going to do. In its simplest form, the prisoner's dilemma imagines that two people are being held without being able to talk to one another for one minor and one major offence. But without a confession, the prosecutors only have enough evidence to convict the pair of the minor offence. If they're convicted of the minor offence, they'll face a 1-year prison sentence. However, if they're convicted of the bigger crime, they'll go down for 3 years instead. So the prosecutors offer the same deal to each prisoner. If you confess, you'll go free, no prison time. But your partner will go down for 3 years. If you both confess, you both go down for 2 years. Well, what'll happen? Well, the obvious thing for the prisoners to do as a pair is to stay silent, because in that case, they'll only face a 1-year prison sentence. But each prisoner will be sat in their cell, not knowing what their partner will do, and they'll think, well, if I stay silent and my partner confesses, I'll go down for 3 years while they get off scot-free. However, if I confess, I go free. I mean, yeah, sure, they'll be stuck in prison for 3 years, but I'll go free. So their rational choice is to confess, regardless of what their partner does, in which case they'll both go down for 2 years, because they took the choice that was driven by their own agenda, but influenced by what they thought the other person was going to do. Now, this logical outcome could change if the prisoners were able to talk to one another, or if they played the game a few times in order to establish trust. But the central outcome of basic game theory is pretty crushing. It's easy for people to make bad decisions for the group when they're behaving rationally as individuals. However, there is a far more optimistic view to be had of this situation, based off of neurological and sociological research. People do not act selfishly a lot of the time, and in laboratory conditions, their choices in similar games, such as the public goods game, will often not follow the logical flow of game theory. In fact, they actually behave far more collaboratively or more pro-socially. Neuroscientists have found that the ventral striatum, an area deep inside the brain, is particularly active when people behave pro-socially. Now, this is interesting because this area is part of the brain's reward system, which makes us feel really good, and it's also an evolutionary old part of the brain, something present in our ancestors thousands of years ago. At the same time, sociologists and psychologists point to the common desire for us to meet the expectations of others, which results in pro-social behavior. And this is especially the case in societies where being pro-social is held up as the norm. So, if there's all this research to show that humans are wired to behave pro-socially and collaboratively, then why do we see so many failures to cooperate all around us? Well, my theory is that it's because humans are a tribal species. We are only wired to cooperate with people who are close to us, perhaps the traditional tribal community of 20 to 30 people. Beyond that, the primitive part of our brains sees other people as either irrelevant or a potential threat, in which case we can easily revert to this cold, detached, but destructive behavior. And this could be a really big problem. Successful collaboration at macro rather than tribal levels is becoming more and more important. We're living in a world that is becoming increasingly interdependent and interconnected, especially for things like trade, finance and economics, international relations, environmental sustainability, and culture. Global cooperation, or the consequences of me first failures, are also becoming more and more important. We only need to look at current issues to see that there are really, really big global problems where it may seem easier just to let everyone else act for the social good while secretly pursuing a selfish course for oneself. It's not all bad, though. There have been important successes arising from urgent collaboration in recent times. For example, the collaboration of central banks around the world to manage the potential consequences of the global financial crisis a decade ago. A stark contrast from the Great Depression 80 years prior. But we need to do a lot better, urgently. Perhaps one solution is to use technology to show us that our tribe is now the whole world. Satellite images and blockchain data shines a light on who is cooperating and who is not. While artificial intelligence can map and manage the potential spread of pandemics from one community to another. Or maybe we can use technology to moderate these me-first behaviors. For instance, through advanced stock control of food supply, we can dampen panic buying before it starts. Certainly, when times are calmer, it's far easier to contemplate cooperation. Now, whenever I visit the supermarket, the shelves are well stocked, there's far less elbow jamming, and everyone can walk away with the items that they came to purchase. The takeaway? We need to learn to control this me-first instinct. We live in a far more stable world when we stop putting ourselves first. Thank you.